2 Corinthians is an interesting book in the Bible. In some ways, it's probably one of the more personal books or letters written. And that's because Paul had a hot and cold relationship with the people at Corinth. And if you read the correspondence that he has with them, that's pretty easy to pick up on. In fact, a lot of scholars think that 2 Corinthians is a compilation of two separate letters that Paul wrote. So there may have actually been 3 letters that Paul wrote to the church at Corinth. We know about the first one. We also know that the people at Corinth were divided up among themselves. Some of them wanted to have their favorite preacher, Apollos, Barnabas, Paul, somebody else. Some of them thought that what Paul was teaching was not the full gospel, that he was only telling people part of it, that he needed to do more, that in fact, like in other places that Paul founded churches, there was always a group that came in after him that would tell the people that he had converted that he didn't tell them everything they needed to know, that they actually needed to become Jewish in order to become fully Christian. Which meant for the male, circumcision and keeping of the Jewish calendar, including all the dietary laws. And you may recall that in many of Paul's letters, he even goes on to say that if you let those people take you back into slavery, you're accursed. But you can't blame those people, really, because people have always wanted something concrete. They've always wanted something black and white without any gray areas. They've always wanted to be able to assert the truth with the kind of confidence that would allow no doubt. They want to have all of the answers, and they want to be for sure. I would suggest that if you're absolutely certain, and you never raise questions about faith and matters of faith in your own life, that you aren't very far along the path of growing as a Christian. It's very easy to get stuck in one place. It's very easy to stagnate and to rely on what you think you know in this moment, and to substitute that for actual faith and confidence and come up with something that is not really Christianity at all. Instead, it's your own creation. Paul defended the gospel of Jesus, and he proclaimed the gospel of Jesus to all those different people that he went to. And if I could say that Paul's theology in this correspondence teaches us anything, it is that the confidence of faith can allow us to live through the challenges of life. It will not remove us from them. No matter how strong your faith is or how strong you think your faith is, you're not going to be removed from difficulty. You're not going to be removed from challenges. Things are still going to happen, and sometimes bad things are going to happen. I've seen in the many years that I've been doing this, I have seen where people had difficulty in life, and sometimes through prayer and much meditation, those difficulties were resolved. I've also seen it where people have prayed earnestly, faithfully, and with faith, and their problems weren't resolved in a way that they wanted them to be. In fact, I've seen many people, many Christians, many great Christians, in my opinion, who prayed for God to heal them of some disease, and he didn't. Not in the way that they wanted to be healed. They died. I've seen others who believed that God would take a disease away from them, and they were healed. I can see no rhyme or reason in any of those cases to suggest that one did something better than the other did. I don't have an answer. It would be easy to say that the people who had their prayers granted in the way that they wanted them to be granted had more faith than the ones who didn't have it granted, but that's not true. Not at least in my experience. In fact, I've seen people of great faith have difficult things happen to them one after another. Have you ever met somebody that it just seems like there's always something tragic happening in their life? There's always some new drama that comes up. Not something that they necessarily create, but it just seems like one thing after another, as if a person is suffering from some kind of curse. I've seen that. I'm sure you have too. I've also seen other people who, like a cat, always land on their feet. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter how much they lack faith. They always seem to land on their feet. The good and the evil. And Jesus himself said, look, God sends the rain on the good and the evil. You're not going to figure this out. You're not going to figure out why it is that God works in someone's life in one way and doesn't work the same way in another person's life. I've given up on trying to figure that out. I've also given up on trying to have the kind of confidence in my faith that makes me certain about a lot of things. In fact, I would go so far as to say that if you really want to understand Paul, you've got to come to this, that certainty and faith are exclusive of one another. If you have faith, you'll never be certain. What faith can give you is confidence. Confidence, not certainty. Confidence to live, but not certainty that everything's going to turn out like you want it to. In fact, what Paul is doing in this letter is challenging the people at Corinth, because, as you know, there were a lot of people there who didn't like Paul. In fact, some scholars have even suggested that the reason 2 Corinthians has the tone that it has is because not only were people revolting against Paul, but some of them had actually gone into court to try to wrest control of the church from him. And so Paul says, if you read the chapter previous to the one that we read, Paul says, I've been in distress. I have been pushed. I have been pushed down. I have been persecuted. I have suffered. I have done all of these things for the sake of transmitting this gospel that really is in a clay jar. Now, if you want to understand that, think about those terracotta pots that you put plants in. If you set one of those down too hard, you don't have to drop it. Just set it down too hard, what happens? It breaks, right? It's useless after that. And so Paul is saying our faith is like that, that in this life, it's like this faith is given to us and it's preserved, but it's very fragile and it's very difficult. And we have to be careful. We have to be very careful in what we teach. We have to be very careful in how we live. We have to be careful because this gift of faith is a fragile gift. And only those who endure to the end with faith are going to make it to the next step, to the next level. And now after he's done that, Paul comes into the chapter that we read from a few moments ago, and coming after saying that he's been perplexed, that he's been confused, he's been hurt, he's been persecuted, and all of those things, he says that this earthly body that we have is like a tent. Like a tent. Any of you like camping in a tent? I used to do it out in the backyard when I was growing up. It really wasn't a tent. It was just a frame I built out of wood with a sheet over it, but I was really camping. I had my fire and my beanie weenies and my little pot and all that. And what I learned about camping is if you don't have a good sleeping bag, even in the summertime, just before dawn, it gets cold. And you're going to freeze. The second thing I learned is no matter how much off you put on, you're going to be covered in mosquito bites. And so comparing the tent, that life that we have to a tent is an analogy that we can understand. A tent doesn't offer you a whole lot of protection, does it? I mean, even those really, really good army tents that the government might make for soldiers, they're not as durable as a regular building. Eventually, they're going to deteriorate. They're going to start leaking. They're going to start having drafts come through them. And if you leave it up for very long, the elements are going to take a toll on it. And before you know it, it won't offer you the protection that you wanted it to. It won't do for you what you thought it would. And Paul says that's what this life is like. It's like a tent. It's like living in a tent. And the longer you live in it, the more it deteriorates. The more it deteriorates, the more challenges we face. The more challenges we face, the more faith we need to be able to muster to get through those challenges. And if your faith is the kind of faith that requires you to be absolutely certain, you're not really going to have faith at all. you're not really going to have any faith at all, because faith does not produce certainty. Faith produces confidence. Confidence to live. Confidence to say that in spite of whatever happens, I know the end of the story. Confidence to believe that whatever challenges come your way, whatever happens to you in life, is not going to destroy the real you. Only God can do that. Only God could do that. On the other hand, that there's nothing within us that allows us to have the kind of strength wherein we could say it doesn't matter what happens to us, we can overcome it and we can thrive and we can do all of those things in spite of life's challenges, because that may not be true. We might not be able to do that. Instead of giving certainty, faith gives confidence. To step forward and move to the next level regardless of what has happened to you in the past. You may have lived a hard life. It may seem in your life that everything you touch turned out wrong. Why do you keep going? Because of faith. Faith is the confidence to live and believe that ultimately God has this. And that's what Paul says. He says this earthly dwelling that we live in is a tent. It's deteriorating. It's crumbling. And just like us, it's getting older. It's getting more wrinkled, more feeble. How many of you are more feeble than you were 10 years ago? Yeah, of course you are. How many of you feel physically better than you did when you were 20? Nobody going to raise their hand? Of course not. We are in the process throughout our lives of deteriorating. The only thing that can keep us going is the confidence of faith. At least that's the only thing I can think of. Now, I know a lot of people get up and they live life every day and they don't have faith and they seem to thrive better than some people with faith. And I don't understand that, except what I do understand is that without faith, I couldn't make the next step in life. Faith is a necessity for me. It's the only way to get through when things get hard. There's no guarantee that things are going to get easy. If you're facing challenges today, no matter what those challenges are, there's no guarantee in your faith that automatically those things are going to be done away with, because they won't be. What matters is that in the midst of those things, whatever those hardships might be, you and I can live with confidence that God has got our back. And I think that's the message from Paul. He said in other places that this life, not only is it like a tent, but it's like grass that comes out in the morning and it's green and lush, and by evening the sun has scorched it and it's withered and died. That's life. That we are like a mist that appears very early in the morning. But as soon as the sun rises, the mist is done away with. That's how fragile we are. But our fragility is offset by our confidence in God. And so Paul says that I know that to be absent from this body is to be with the Lord. I have confidence in that. And I also have confidence to know that one day, I'm not sure I can explain it, but one day we're going to be given a new dwelling place. And it's not going to be one that's made with human hands. It's not going to be one that is fragile. It is not going to be one that the elements of life and troubles of life can come against and make it deteriorate. It's going to be indestructible. It's going to be immortal. And it's going to be with God. There's no certainty in our faith. There's confidence in our faith. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can't tell you what heaven's going to be like. I can't tell you what that new dwelling place is going to be like. I can only tell you, you need to believe. You need to trust. You need to have faith, the kind of faith that doesn't require you to have an answer to every question, but rather a faith that will allow you to live and grow in God, so that with confidence we can say with Paul, it doesn't matter what I face, I won't give up. It doesn't matter if I'm persecuted, I won't stop. It doesn't matter if I'm frail, I know there's something better coming. And because I have that confidence, I can go forth and live without fear. Wouldn't you like to live without fear? You can. You absolutely can. If you have the confidence of Paul, that to be absent from here is to be present with God, however that happens. And that's what our faith is really about. Yes, we want to grow, we want to mature, but ultimately, our goal is to be at home with God. And if that's not your goal, it should be. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen.